the Hoosat network, or the ASIC miner for Hoosat that recently came out. It was actually an FPGA, and I'm going to get to that right now. How's everybody in chat doing, by the way? Haven't heard from you guys. I don't know if chat's even working. All right. Where is this? Here we go. All right. So on February 17th, Hoosat, or Osprey Electronics, excuse me, had this announcement. Exciting news from the Osprey R&D team. If you guys are not familiar with this particular company, they're famous for creating the first easy to use miner, FPGA miner for Kaspa. That's really kind of where they made their name. Kind of like Ice River made their name with the first ASICs for Kaspa. And to give you guys a little bit of the background of cryptocurrency mining, you typically go from essentially CPU to GPU, then FPGA, and finally ASICs. That's the evolution of a blockchain network within the perspective of mining hardware. So eventually everything goes to ASICs unless there is some sort of resistance placed in one of those steps. There's never been resistance from FPGA to ASICs. There's only been resistance in CPU to GPU, or GPU to ASIC, or GPU to FPGA, which eventually ends in ASICs. So whenever you hear as far as like ASICs resistance, it really is FPGA resistance on a network. And that's what it actually means, just to give you a little bit of background on that. Now, Osprey, like I said, came out and they said we've reached another major milestone. Walla and Whohash bit streams are now available for mining on the E300 platform. This does mean that both of these blockchains will eventually be targetable by ASIC manufacturers. I think there's a little bit of burnout on the Kaspa fork side of things. So I don't know if that will actually take place. You almost don't need ASIC resistance on a Kaspa fork as long as you do just a little bit of change of the algorithm, because there hasn't been huge drives from FPGA or ASIC manufacturers. So we might see these two particular coins end up being stuck in FPGA hell for a while. Why do I call it FPGA hell? Well, FPGAs require something called bit streams, and bit streams are extremely difficult to program to mine different cryptocurrencies, meaning that there are very few people that can actually do it. And the people that do it typically do it at a very high cost. So they charge people a lot of money in fees to utilize their bit streams, and therefore, it doesn't end up being viable. Another thing is it's very difficult to get your hands on FPGA equipment. That's been made easier by companies like Osprey. Well, pretty much only Osprey. And so you can get that done by them, or at least like you can get your hands on them through them, but you're completely reliant on them for adding support for new coins, etc., which also means that you don't really have any capability of being ahead of the curve, right? And if you aren't able to stay ahead of the curve, because as soon as a bit stream comes out for Osprey, the bit stream's already been out for a long time, and you end up paying essentially like exorbitant fees. On a typical CPU fee is going to be from like 1 to 3%. Same with GPUs. There's typically, no miner fees on ASIC miners unless you do a custom firmware. But when you're talking about FPGAs, the bitstream fees are extremely high. They can be as high as 20%. and I really haven't seen many lower than like maybe 7 to 10%. So it's a little difficult. Now, Integra guys say he just bought 7 more, so good luck with that. I wouldn't buy them, but there is that. Argent saying that the stream is frozen. I'm not seeing that frozen on my side, so let me know. But let's go ahead and continue. So, it says that we've reached another milestone and released it, and it gives you the new features. They have a blinking LED feature, enhanced voltage and temperature readings, Walla mining support, and WhoHash mining support. Obviously, you can go download it. It's pretty easy to update. I have a guide on how to update one of these. They let me borrow it a couple times. So I was able to borrow it and do a couple guides. Updating the firmware is pretty easy. Now, it was my understanding that Hoosat was going to be FPGA and ASIC resistant. So I tweeted at Hoosat and I said, balls in your court, what's the story? Morning glory. I didn't say that last part, but they replied and said, WhoHash is facing with lookup table issues. Tonto devised a fix and the actions upset Doctor, resulting in the discontinuation of SRB miner development support. As such, fix for the lookup table issue exists, but a GPU miner hasn't been developed yet. So this was not the question I was asking, so it kind of threw me off. So we got additional information about the status of the Hoosat network without even necessarily having asked for it. And it sounds like Hoosat's in trouble. To give you guys an idea, there are 2 active mining developers currently out. Well, we could say 4 total. We'll say 4. But really, there's like only 1 that actively develops consistently, and that's Doctor with SRB Miner for CPUs and GPUs. Most of the other mining software developers have either disappeared or made enough money at this point, I guess, that they don't really actively develop that often. You have IEDoc from BZ Miner, who develops, but I think he's made enough money off Kaspa that he kind of just hangs out. And he does still enjoy it, so he does it, but not at the release schedule that, say, SRB Miner's at. Following that up, of course, we have LOL Miner, and it's kind of the same situation. I think LOL Miner probably made enough money off of Ethereum that he's kind of in that chill mode. It's not very frequent releases. And then you have like some newer ones that are a little bit less experienced, like Rigel Miner, for example. 10 Miner, which hasn't really released anything in a while. Team Red Miner is another case, like LOL Miner. They haven't released updates in a while because they probably made enough money off of ETH at this point that they can chill. So there's not like a ton of options, and really you don't want to be starting beef with Doctor. That's my opinion. Like, try not to start beef with the guy that pretty much is the only one releasing updates consistently. And I also don't know why I got this answer from them. It exposed something very negative with that blockchain from my perspective with Hoosat. I would be very cautious surrounding Hoosat at this point. They did say, forgot to say, if Doctor had not dropped support in January, this would not have happened, because otherwise we would have updated our algorithm last week. So Hoosat is completely dependent on miner developers to be successful at being ASIC resistant, and they can't do it themselves. Now, they pretty much, and here's the thing that really comes out of this, that this exposes, right? This exposes that Hoosat does not have near as much development expertise as they need. It's essentially just a fork of Kaspa, and this is basically identified further by the fact that when they were running their vote to decide if they were going to be ASIC resistant or allow these units on their network, that the only immediate solution they had to that was to rolling back to CPU only, because obviously you had that a lot of that minor work already done. So I said, because it was kind of throwing me off. And I figured that would be the best way to bait out more response. Because at this point, I'm just getting suspicious. And they say HTN has started development on our own miner because of the issue to start in January 2025. There's already a CPU Strata miner developed with C, which is debugging in the debugging phase to iron out the Stratum protocol and mining. Once the CPU miner is functional and development, will move to OpenCL and CUDA implementations. To which I did say, I said, none of this answers if you're actually, I think this was after the because I actually double replied, I think, to one of these. And I said, but none of this answers if you're actually planning to fork to stop FPGA or an ETA. So I finally did get this answer, which is really what we were looking for. They said there's voting on our Discord right now, currently running for a week, if we drop the CPU until we build our own GPU miner, if we allow FPGA to run until we build our GPU miner, or do we continue with who-hash lookup table issue. So 1, the algorithm update candidates are available. 2, miner supporting such update is under development. So now it's just the fact that the community decides the direction of HTN and Tonto will develop necessary code. Anyways, it's just a bug in the code which can be fixed. So I did say, thanks, that is what was needed. That's all I needed out of them. I don't need to harp on anyone in general. I know they're working through this. Tonto did post that poll, and they decided to allow the FPGA miner in the poll until the GPU miner has been developed. Now, like I said, this brings up red flags for me on a couple levels. 1, not being able to work with Doctor is a pretty big deal. I need to get with Doctor on specifically why this lookup table issue was a red flag for him, if it was just too much work, or if he's finding issues with the project within the project itself. That could really be an eye-opener. I haven't gotten a reply yet, I don't think. Let me double check, because I did ask, but it's hard to keep up with all of this stuff sometimes. So let me find my Discord convo with him. Give me 1 second. Yeah, Doctor still hasn't replied to that. So when he does, we'll provide an update for you guys on what we're looking at as far as that's considered. So we have 2 things. We have a new bit stream supporting Walla hash and who hash. We found out that who-hash is facing development issues without support from Doctor. And it does sound like the intention is to fork away from FPGA and ASICs. So we'll have to see if they can actually implement it. Now, with these Kaspa forks, I'm getting a bit gun shy with a lot of them, because what we have found is that a lot of the forks have pretty inexperienced developers, and they just aren't able to deliver on their promises. Obviously, Pyron Hash being a very famous one. And just to wrap up on the Pyron Hash one too, I mean, with Pyron Hash, it was very clear that they didn't have the development expertise that they needed. I don't necessarily think anything was malicious, like an intentional rug pull. And I do tend to think that that just seems to be extremely common within cryptocurrency in general lately. And by that, I mean, even with the tokens, it's like we've made a lot of these things so easy to do that people that don't have a lot of experience are doing them, trying to make a quick buck, and then kind of effing it up and then running away when they get scared, right? Which they should, because a lot of people are putting a lot of money into this. So that's kind of my wrap up on that. I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts on it. Do you trust who-hash to be able to pull through with this kind of development? I hope you enjoyed this clip from the Crypto Mining Show. If you would like to see more from this particular episode, take a look up here. Don't forget to also subscribe to the channel. And if you want to support me directly, you can go to sonofatech.locals.com and become a member. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next Tuesday.